Hello everyone, and welcome back to a video here on the second channel where we are just casually hanging out together and discussing 20w49a, which dropped 2 days ago on the Wednesday. This snapshot introduced the Skulk sensor, which looks to be a very interesting contraption that interacts with redstone. And of course, on the main channel, I made a video all about that if you want to get the details. This video is just a casual discussion about this sensor, some of my thoughts on it basically. First of all though, we're actually going to jump over to a web browser. We got the wiki page on custom dimensions. So in this snapshot, as you'll see here, it says upcoming in Java Edition 1.17. The minimum height in which blocks can exist within a dimension is now modifiable, and the height at which blocks can be placed is modifiable too. This seems to be in relationship to the minimum Y, and I've seen some screenshots, people sharing stuff of building under the bedrock level, going up to like 2,000 blocks in the sky, and and building up there, and I'm yet to get my head around it, but I watched Ilmango's snapshot video, and he kind of speculated that the way in which they're implementing these changes could suggest that maybe they've got an ace up their sleeve and they're going to change the default world height of the Minecraft world. That was my interpretation of what he was potentially saying. So the ways in which they do this could just mean they'll make a big change, and this part of the world will no longer be at, average Y64 or whatever. It'll be way higher up. We'll have more caves. And that to me really feels like a smart move. I can't see many people being upset about that. Maybe if you're playing in a world you've been in for a long time, then you upgrade and all of a sudden you've got these massive chunk borders going up into the sky. That would be a bit of a bummer, but I think most people, pretty much all people, would really welcome having bigger and deeper caves. And so if that's the direction this game goes in, that would be awesome. If there are performance issues attached to that, that is certainly something to be considered. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the Skulk sensor. Now, I don't think this is going to revolutionize redstone, but I do think it is going to be useful and add in some immersion to your worlds. The main way in which I've been thinking about using this is if I have a base and I'm walking around it interacting with things, I'm now going to have the option to think, rather than put down a button to activate this redstone contraption, this could just automatically activate when I walk up to it, right? And you could hook this up, the redstone, to a lamp to indicate that, the Skulk sensor has been activated, and then it could power your farm as well. Or you might want to fine tune it using the comparator to something specific. So, you could walk up to it and do one of the many things it can detect. Perhaps that is opening a chest, and then it understands you open the chest and activates the contraption. That level of immersion, I think it's going to be great for. You're now going to be thinking about a different type of automation within your base based on player movements. There is obviously traps. These things have been shared on Reddit, just taking old ideas, and now you can activate them with, basically the player just being in the area moving because of these new ways that the Skulk sensor interacts with the world. I think they call them events, right? Like world events, so things happening in the world. So I don't think it's going to change the fundamentals of redstone, but I do think it is going to give more of a relationship between the environment and using redstone. Now, this being said, I think there are some things that should probably be changed with the Skulk sensor. For example, if you're going to work on building redstone around it, the placing of a redstone can actually activate it unless you're holding down shift. And if there's one thing that we forget to do sometimes, it's hold down shift. And wasn't I just holding down shift when I placed that? Oh yeah, see, shift is for walking. Shift and placing blocks doesn't even work. So if you're trying to fix a redstone contraption, if you're trying to build it while the Skulk sensor is there, it could end up like breaking it as you're building it because it's constantly being activated. So one of the things you do when building redstone contraptions is usually have it in a static state, put all the things in place, and then it gets going. So I think there should be a way to disable the Skulk sensor. So perhaps putting power into it means it's no longer going to be able to detect what's going on around it. Obviously, there's a bit of an issue with the fact that the redstone attached to it kind of points into the block, but probably there is a way to figure that out. This thing also makes sound, and the sound is really cool, but you might not actually want to have that, especially if you're using it in a mini game and perhaps you want the players to not really be aware of what's going on underneath the surface, or just in your base, hearing this sound all the time might become a little bit irritating. Perhaps a way to deal with that is to put a wall block above or below it. But I think what might be smart for this block is if it had an interface, okay? Like a way to activate it, deactivate it, change some settings, because I believe that this frequencies feature is really fantastic, but it's got some shortcomings. So let's jump over to the web browser again and have a look at the list here. So we have these different vibration frequencies. So particular events are unique when using the comparator to extract the information from the block. So it starts off pretty good. Step is 1, flap is 2, which by the way I believe is bee's wings flapping. Swim is 3, elytra freefall is 4, and hit ground is 5. And then we get to 6, and now we start to have multiple things overlapping. And so there is a large list of events that this can detect, and we're squeezing it into 15 values. And this is why I think maybe an interface or something a little different. Maybe you teach your Skulk sensor first what it is going to, choose to detect. Because when they start to overlap, they kind of cancel out their usefulness, because like this one right here, what if you hit an entity next to your contraption where you want to detect an item being added to an armor stand? So that overlapping kind of breaks the usefulness of it at the same time. I'm also curious as to what went behind all of this, because they've obviously looked at a bunch of events in the world, but I'm not sure that all of these are going to be particularly useful. It's really hard to figure this stuff out because you've got to play around with it. You've got to think about when it can be useful, you know. The attach block, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but you got to think about when will that actually be useful. And I'm not sure what other events in the world could be a part of this list, but I think maybe it needs to be revised and shortened down. If we're going to have just 15 values, I think it should be limited to 15 things so that there isn't overlaps. Also, these two at the end here, explosion and lightning strike. I like the idea of using that to set off an alarm, because it puts out level 15. Then again, look, so does extended piston and cast fishing rod. So that idea actually goes out of the window a little bit. So this list here, it needs to be refined. It needs to be reduced. Maybe think about what would actually be more beneficial to detect with a Skulk sensor. For example, using a flint and steel. I really can't think of anything other than maybe lighting up a nether portal, but then there's other events there that you could probably detect with an observer or something. So the usefulness of this stuff right here, I think, needs to be reevaluated. And that idea of having a user interface, I think, maybe wouldn't be so necessary if there are only 15 values. It's because there's more than that it makes you think that we should have some way of selecting. Now, I also mentioned the idea of being able to program the Skulk sensor to what event it's going to latch onto. That kind of thing tends to be difficult to implement in an intuitive way, so maybe not the best of ideas, but you know, for what we've seen so far, I really love the way this works. I also love the distance. I think that's really great, that the distance of the event that it captures it then, you know, gives you a different redstone signal strength. I can't really critique that. I think that's really well implemented. But for example, the overlapping of stuff on the frequencies with the comparator does kind of have its issues, you know. I'm just looking at my notes now just to see if I got all of my thoughts out there. I think I did for the most part. Yeah, I think we kind of covered everything I had to think and say about the Skulk sensor. So I'm really interested to see where it goes from here. I know Mojang are listening. It's one of the things that has made recent updates really great, is that they have a very involved sort of relationship with the community, taking in feedback, figuring out what's best for the game. And so I hope they consider making some changes to the Skulk sensor, because currently it's a really great feature. It's going to be awesome, but I think it could be a lot better, and especially with the frequencies and the overlapping of them, as I've stated already. And I guess the other key point was the fact that when you're building around this thing, it gets activated as well. So I think those are the two things that really need refining, right? The frequencies and being able to deactivate and activate this thing would be really, really useful. So I guess that's all of my thoughts for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you some other time. Bye bye.